This video is brought to you by Grace Ice and Water Shield. We got started last week on the tongue groove, and we worked all weekend, just kept putting up more and more tongue groove, and that's what we're going to be doing all this week. Hopefully we'll get it done, and we'll be on to the Grace Ice and Water Shield.
Yeah, race to the finish. We're trying to get this thing watertight. I mean, there's already a tongue groove floor that's down below us, so it's a matter of making it happen and getting it done. So far, weather has been cooperating. It's been great.
So how this works is there's a timber frame structure, and then on the outside of that we have SIPs, which are structurally insulating panels, which insulate and provide a little bit of structure. But on the roof we wanted a tongue groove wood ceiling. So what we're doing is we've got the beams up already. We're putting the tongue groove on top of the beams, and then we'll put the roof SIPs on top of that. So this week's big challenge is putting up all of the tongue groove on the timber frame roof, and then we'll be putting Grace Ice and Water Shield on top of the tongue groove to dry it in.
So just starting on the tongue groove, you would basically start in the bottom and work your way up, and you know, there's so many valleys and dormers in this thing, and you know, there's so many different angles. It's you just have to pick a point and go with it. You got a cutter guy on the ground, you got two guys up on the roof putting it on, and another guy getting boards to you. There's, you know, it's so high in the air, it's kind of a pain, but you know, it's going together pretty good.
So one of the big challenges with this roof is it's 10-12, and I will never do a 10-12 roof again. It's very, very difficult to work on. And what we're having to do is we're putting up the tongue groove is screw basically like chicken strips on the term chicken strips. If you think of a chicken ladder, and you put little cleats on it so the chickens can walk up it.
Oh, we're the chickens.
Yeah. The good news is once we have this tongue groove up, it's the finished ceiling for the inside, and it'll be very beautiful.
It's very labor intensive putting all this stuff up, but you'd think it would just go like really fast. It's like slow, tedious, and then you have to make sure you have your vapor barrier that comes up the outside wall, basically comes up and wraps over top the tongue groove. So it's not like you can just run to the end and be like, oh, I just run past the wall. No, we got to put that vapor barrier up, and so we're working in steps as we go.
The process is pretty simple. You just cut your tongue groove, and then you put it on top of your beams, and then you just nail the tongue groove to your beams from the top. So it's pretty easy. You're working from the top, working downward. But we're having to use 2x thickness tongue groove because some of these spans are more than 3 or 4 feet. They're pretty long, so we've got to have something pretty long there. So when you're using a 2x tongue groove, not only is the board heavier, but it doesn't want to go into the groove as easy as like a 1x tongue groove. All the joints are hidden on the back side of the beam, so you got a beam and you got your tongue groove on top of that. So you don't have to be super neat with your cuts, and that does save a lot of time because the person cutting on the ground doesn't have to have a measurement each time.
So now all the tongue groove's on, now it's time to actually install the Grace Ice and Water Shield. Say Grace Ice and Water Shield, I've used it before. It's a great product. So we got our little ice and water shield, and I've installed a lot of this stuff. Today is not a hot day, so it's actually nice to put down, but on a really hot day it can be a little tricky because this stuff turns really sticky. So you can see it's got marks on here, and each one represents a foot or 6 inches, the little hash marks. So it's easier to roll out, make a chunk, whatever you need, and then go on the roof and put it up instead of dealing with a heavy roll. So let's roll it out. I needed an 8-foot chunk. I'm gonna make it pretty easy. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 foot right here. Roof is particularly a little bit different due to the fact that the ice and water shield is also our vapor barrier inside. So that installed, we did the gables and the eave already, and then we did the valley, which is most important. You want to do that first, and then you want to run your seams. They run up so the water can run down if it ever gets in here. Runs down to your valley, to your eave, and out your building. And when you're overlapping, you can line up those hash marks to get your overlap. And then also for the valleys, there's a ripcord in it. So, you know, you put your valley in, the ice and water shield, and you take that ripcord and you rip the paper, and you pull that completely off, and then the paper comes out on one side and the paper comes out on the other. And also, it's a roof layer that actually sheds water, and if a fastener goes through it, it's self-sealing. So if you ever have, you know, your tin leak or whatever, that's what Grace Ice and Water Shield does, and it basically protects your structure of your house. It's a second layer protection. Electrical in a timber frame is kind of tricky in sealing and a lot of stuff. Sometimes they router out beams and stuff, but we wound up running a routed out a piece in the tongue groove on top. We run our wire up and drops into our box, which we can put on later inside. So it's a little bit tricky, a little bit of planning, but you know, not too bad. Make it happen.
This was a big week, really good feeling to have all this tongue and groove with the Grace Ice and Water Shield on it. But you may have noticed we have the attic bonus room over there. We're trying to save some money on this house design. We went with a hybrid. So part of it is beams and tongue groove, and then the parts that aren't as used are just sips over, you know, a scarce amount of beams. We have that whole area that's still exposed, and the only way that we're going to get that shedding water is to put all the rough sips up. So it's a big week next week. We're going to be back to the boom truck and slinging sips, and hopefully have this entire house roughed next week.
Fingers crossed that we get to that stage with no rain.
Thanks for following along, and we'll see you next week. You know what we'll be doing? We hope to get this place dried in.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.